Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the participants. I'm Saryu from S. Chand Publishing. Today on 12th May, I welcome each one of you on this third session of Maths webinar under the CPD training initiative by S. Chand Publishing. In total, there are 6 sessions. The rest 3 sessions will be held on 13th May, that's tomorrow, 19th May and 20th May, that is coming Fridays and Saturday. On 20th May, that is on the day of our last Maths webinar session, we will have a quiz based on all these 6 sessions with exciting prizes. So please try to attend all the sessions. The topic of today's session is how to ease maths anxiety in the classroom, part 1. And our speaker is Ms. Jaspreet Sethi. Jaspreet ma'am is a maths expert and holds master's degree in mathematics. Just a second. Jaspreet ma'am is a maths expert and holds master's degree in mathematics from Columbia University. She is a LETRS certified. LETRS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. Also, she has authored a series of children's books. Ms. Jaspreet has not only taught maths at some of the prestigious schools, both at national and international level, but also has served as the department head in different schools and has been a member of advisory board for different universities. So before we start off with our session, there are some rules we need to follow. All the participants will be put on mute throughout the session. Please keep a pen and paper to note down the information and any questions that you need to ask. The chat box will be enabled only during the question and answer round and will be disabled for the rest of the session. For e-certificates teachers, you must fill the feedback form, which will be sent to your registered email ID. Now, I welcome you, Jaspreet ma'am, to this session, and we all hope to have an enriching experience with you in today's session. Over to you, Jaspreet ma'am.
Thank you so much, Saryu. Good evening, everyone, and anyone in a different time zone. Hello. I will share my screen. Saryu, can you stop sharing?
Yes.
Thank you. Is everyone able to see my screen? Saryu, can you give me a heads up? Is
Yes,
it visible?
It's visible. You're audible.
Perfect. So hello, everybody. We are meeting for the third time, some of us, and some of us are meeting for the first time. How to ease math anxiety. Before we begin the topic, as always, if you've been part of these sessions, we play a game. So for this, Saryu, I would ask and request if you can open the chat so that our participants can type in their answers in the chat.
It's open, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So here's a game. Let's play. What number should replace the question mark? Let's see if we can have some fastest fingers first to tell us what's going to go in the question mark. The spot for the question mark. We have a couple of people answering. Okay. Some of you are writing 10. And some of you are writing 36. I'm seeing some of those as the responses. Saryu, you could close the chat now. Thank you so much. One of the ways that I usually begin any session is with a game. And sometimes games have a clear-cut response. And sometimes there's more to it. And I love to check in with my audience and my participants on what they were thinking when they said, for example, 10. Some of you said 36. And what were you thinking when you said 36? Without giving the answer, I would like for you to take a moment and think about these other numbers and if they have any meaning in this question, if they hold any meaning in this question. And since the chat is off, I think you're just answering to yourself now that all of these other numbers here are almost extraneous information. And we have to catch the main idea here or extract the main idea. And those of you who said 36, it's right. We're looking at some perfect squares here going in sequence, 3 square, 4 square, 5 square, and that would be 6 square, 36. This is a question from logic challenges from this puzzle number 75 by Mensa. And just a fun game that I like to play. As I move forward, this is what I just said, that sometimes we're looking at a lot of extraneous information and we need to extract what really matters. Am I audible? Sorry, if you can just check if
yes, ma'am, you're audible.
That's good. Okay, great. Thank you. I would like you all to now take this exercise where I would like you to describe your favorite class or your teacher, your favorite teacher. And again, this is not where the chat box is open. I would want you to think of some characteristics of your favorite teachers. And then I want you to think about what role does or did that teacher play in you developing a love for the subject. At the same time, I want you to describe your worst teacher experience. And I think we all have had some. And did you still retain love for your subject, for that subject, despite that teacher's attitude towards you or the class? I want everybody to give this a little thought. And also what I'm going to ask next, which is that we are so responsible. We have spoken about this in our last 2 sessions of how teaching is such a big responsibility and all of us hold such an important place in our students' lives. So we set the tone and sometimes we are the ones who may be the reason why a student starts loving or hating a subject. It's a big responsibility. I'm aware of that. And everyone I know who doesn't like math actually attributes the dislike to the teacher's ways and hardly the subject. This is also a truth. And yet, life-altering decisions have been taken on career paths and higher studies based on teachers' and parents' perceptions of the students' abilities. Kindness is another thing that I discussed in the previous session. We're trying to make this world a better place. We're trying to solve some problems and not create new ones. And there's something known as the math divide, which is something that I have listed personally as my experience in the classroom. And that math divide is something I'm trying to bridge with these sessions. Some of this has been addressed in the previous sessions, the last 2 sessions. Students will not connect with and pursue math when they lack language and vocab, an engaging lesson, tools to absorb and assimilate information, problem-solving strategies, motivation to persevere, initiative to try, working memory and long-term memory skills, focus and retention skills, and the understanding that math is not about rules, speed, or getting the right answer, but solving problems. Solving problems with logical reasoning, with analyzing, summarizing, estimating, And lastly, they will not connect with math when they don't have accessibility to math, which comes in the form of number sense and math fact fluency. All the ones that I have put in bold are something that I tried to address in my first 2 sessions. This being the 3rd session out of the 6, I am going to try in these sessions to address, of course, still give you some engaging lessons, but also tools to absorb and assimilate information that you can take back in your classroom, and hopefully give you some ways in which you can get your students to be motivated to persevere, have initiative to try and not give up, and have accessibility to maths. These are things that I will work for this week. That's today and tomorrow. So using stories to teach math has happened, and addressing and alleviating math anxiety in the classroom is today and tomorrow. And today and tomorrow, I'm going to break it down in the following ways. Today, we're going to talk about what is math anxiety, why does it happen, and I share some resources. And then we talk about reflective practices and strategies that can help us. Tomorrow, I talk about some more strategies and tools on how to alleviate anxiety. But more than anything, tomorrow is going to be a time when I talk about how to elevate and have mastery level teaching, because that is what is in your control. You cannot control the students you get, and you cannot control somebody's fear of, say, swimming, and you are a swimming coach, but you can control the way you guide them and you support them throughout the process. So what's in our control? How to prevent anxiety and how to spread joy. So every time I was typing anxiety, I was getting some anxiety when I was typing math anxiety throughout this presentation. And I thought to myself, well, I want the opposite of that. So I need to make sure that I bring in how to spread math joy. So today, Friday, that's the plan. Tomorrow, that's the plan. And we dive right in. What is math anxiety? Why does it happen? And what are some resources I can share with you? Firstly, what? What does it feel like in the mind? Fear, discomfort, attitudinal responses, sometimes not even verbal. It could be non-verbal. I can't do it. I can't move. I don't know how to proceed. I don't know what to do. Nervousness, low confidence when students don't speak up in a class. That is all part of math anxiety. What it looks like on the body would be sometimes sweating, verbal, I can't do this, putting their hands up. What if I fail? I don't get it. Racing heartbeat, avoidance, reluctance, resistance, and nausea. All of these are very real. And where is it coming from to begin with? Well, this is the what it looks like and why does it happen? Well, one of the reasons is something beyond your control sometimes as a teacher. These are learning differences. But educating yourself on these learning differences is important. Whenever I bring in these learning differences, and whenever we have Q&A, one of the questions I always get is that where were these differences 20, 30, 40 years ago? How have they just come up? Actually, there is a good reason for that as well. These differences always existed, but there was no research, or there was little research to give it a name, to identify it, to do something about it. So why? Some of those learning differences I would like to educate you on, and then I'm going to focus on some of them which are very pertinent to math. Well, one of them is dyspraxia. Dyspraxia is when there's difficulty in fine and gross motor skills, or when you hold something, you touch something, those are your motor skills. So poor balance, poor pencil grasp, hand-eye coordination, something like, let's say you give somebody a ball and you throw it and it just hits them, they're not able to catch it. So that's poor hand-eye coordination. And organizational difficulties. Dyslexia, which is another learning difficulty, which is difficulty with reading, spelling, writing, and related cognitive processing. Dysgraphia, which is difficulty to write, or when you see a student excessively erasing something. Poor organized writing on a page, poor organization of ideas, poor sentence structure or paragraph structure, and a limited expression of ideas. And there's something known as, and it's very real, called dyscalculia, which is a learning difficulty specific to math. And this is not new. As I said, that there has been more research in today's time, and there's been a more rational explanation for what has been happening in the past. We'll delve more into the specific learning challenge for math students sometimes, which is where we're talking about the individual's abilities affected to understand and work with numbers. So people with dyscalculia may struggle with number sense and sequencing. And some individuals, and this is not related to dyscalculia, this would be some other learning challenges, may struggle with math because they have difficulty understanding and manipulating visual spatial information, which would look something like this, that a student may have difficulty in understanding 3D and how something can be represented, which is 3D, can be represented on a 2D surface. Some learners may face difficulties with language processing, and this can make it difficult for them to decode and comprehend word problems and other math-related language. And there's something known as executive functioning, which is something I'm going to talk about next, which consists of cognitive processes to effectively and efficiently plan, assimilate, organize, and complete tasks. Another one, which is something we are sometimes maths teachers are notoriously known for, is this obsession with speed and rote memorization of rules, formulas, procedures, steps, and the like, without any good explanation on why or how. What do we do of these learning differences? How do we navigate? Well, first is to read a little more on all of these challenges that I spoke about and get some more idea on what it really entails and how the struggle is very real. So some mindfulness, some kindness, some patience are some underlying things that I'm asking you to have no matter what. Those students that you may have at some point looked at as lazy are actually not trying to give you a hard time. They are having a hard time, and they do not have the tools on how to navigate and come out of it, or at least cope with it. Learning differences, some strategies that I will give you apart the patience and the kindness, that is something that you need to develop, would be to have visuals in your classroom. For example, this is the distributive property. A lot of times, a lot of algebra is taught with very little visual. We just expect our students to understand X and Y and R and B. I like to show my distributive property, for example, saying that what if I had 3 red and 4 blue? So let me draw that, 3 red and 4 blue. And if I do 2 times that, that means I have 2 groups of that. And that'll get my student to easily see what's happening, why I'm actually multiplying and making that 6R plus 8B. I can actually count it visually right here, 6 red and 8 blue. So have more visuals to explain things in your classroom. Some other visuals, for example, last time I had talked about the Pythagorean theorem's proof. I am trying to show that with these tools. These are called Unifix cubes. They're readily available in the market or on Amazon. And these are very good tools to use. And I will also emphasize their use in my CPA, concrete pictorial abstract segment next week. So I'm trying to actually show the square that I can make along the shorter legs, and then actually transpose these here to show how the sum of these 2 squares is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. And it's very visual. They can count. They can actually count the 16 and the 9 and the 16 and get it back here. Sometimes some students ask me, why do I have these as brown? Well, I was just running out of blue. There's no other reason why that's brown. And some other visuals, like with fractions. A lot of times we teach unit fractions, and I'm seeing a lot of students just memorizing when the denominator is small, that means the fraction is bigger. Well, why? A visual and a context, a story. Here's my pizza, and I only have 2 people to share it with. And here I have 4 people. So if I'm going to cut it into 2 parts, I'm going to get a bigger share. And if I cut it into 4 parts, I'm going to get a smaller share. So half is bigger, greater than 1/4. Visuals, really important. How do we work on executive functioning? Firstly, a quick reminder, executive functioning is consisting of all the cognitive processes to effectively and efficiently plan, assimilate, organize, and complete tasks. A lot of times, yes, we teachers we are magicians. We are much more than just math teachers. And sometimes we have to work on a lot of things that you may think is not part of your domain. But if you don't make it your part of your domain, then that will interfere with your domain. So working on executive functioning would look like the following: giving your students more graphic organizers and teaching your students how to take notes effectively so that they can refer back to those notes and transfer whatever was done in school and in the class from working memory, actually take it to long-term memory. But that doesn't mean writing everything copiously, everything that I'm saying, but taking some very important or, again, extraneous information needs to be discarded, but the main ideas, and extracting the main ideas of what I'm trying to say. And sometimes explicit teaching is required on how this needs to be done, especially in early years and primary, and then reminding them in middle and high so that they don't forget that this is the way we organize ourselves. So graphic organizers look something like this. This is basically my version of something known as a Freer model, which is when I introduce a new vocab, then I cut my page into these quadrants, and I talk about of course, whatever term was given. Let my children sit in groups and define the word or concept in their own words to kind of own up and own the word. Describe any key characteristics or features of that word. Give some examples and non-examples, and describe how this is used or applied in the real world. I do that with pretty much every term that is given out. So here's an example. We're talking about a quadrilateral, and my students wrote what they understood: a 4-sided polygon with 4 corners and 4 angles. Describing some key features: 4 sides, 4 vertices, 2 diagonals, sum of interior angles is 360 degrees. Some examples and non-examples: parallelogram, square, rectangle, rhombus, kite, trapezoid or trapezium. And non-examples would be triangle, pentagon, hexagon. How is it used in the real world? In building design, in construction, in engineering, in art, and hopefully you have told them more stories and given them more historic background on this graphic organizer. The other thing would mean that when it comes to note-taking, you are giving specific information with examples. So I'm going to go to a high level example here. An algebraic equation is an equality, not inequality, is an equality involving variables. And it says that the value of the expression on one side of the equality sign is equal to the value of the expression on the other side. What does that even mean? I show that with an example. I'm going to show the working shortly. Let's say I'm giving them another piece of note. An equation may have linear expressions on both sides. Just as numbers, variables can also be transposed from one side of the equation to the other. Again, with specific examples. So with the first one, I'm showing inverse operations. I'm not saying that 8 just goes to the other side and changes sign. I'm showing explicitly that I'm adding 8 to show the inverse operation. And that's when my -8 and 8 becomes a 0. And that leaves me with 3x equals 27, which is 19 plus 8. And then to get rid of the 3 that is being multiplied with x, I'm using the inverse operation of division and my dividing by 3 on both sides, which gives me x equals 9. And not leaving them that easily, giving them an opportunity to check their own equation by substitution and seeing exactly what I said, that is the left side equal to the right side? Is the expression on one side of the equality sign equal to the value of the expression on the other side? And once that check is done, then I move on to my next example, which is to show that just as numbers, just as I added 8, I can also be subtracting 2x on both sides. And this way I'll be able to solve for x and then, of course, check by substitution. So note-taking and graphic organizers are something which are really underused, but very effective in your classroom. The other reason why math anxiety exists is very evident. It's sometimes teaching. It is. And that is in our control. And sometimes it may not be, how we teach. It's sometimes so, between the, the breathing moments that you have with your students. Sometimes it may not be when you are actually presenting your lesson. Maybe it's before or after, and it would look something like this. That the content is not broken down in a way that it is understandable or relevant and can be connected with and assimilated. We talked about how to connect with our students with engaging stories and historic background. Prior learning experience was negative, and that's something that you can't control, but you can, with being a better example, show that you're not the same. They are not in the same class. They are not with the same person. Previous teacher or parent personality, tone, reactions, test paper handout experience, giving feedback at your desk when another student is waiting behind. And this happens sometimes, we teachers are guilty of this. We're trying to talk to a student and give them some sort of constructive criticism, but there's another student waiting behind right there. And that makes the student we're talking to very conscious. Sometimes the student who we are about to speak to also very conscious. PTM discussions and overhearing you talk negatively about the student in the staff room or with another teacher, coordinator, principal. Sometimes you or the previous teacher have emphasizing speed when they are processing their thoughts. For example, you've asked an answer to a question and a child is thinking, and without giving any wait time, you're saying, yes, what is it? Well, that child is thinking. We have to give some wait time, which means quiet time. And there are some things that are not a teacher's, are not completely a teacher's problem. Sometimes there are parents that are putting some pressure, fear of failure, very high expectations, sibling comparison, performance, and very high ask of the students, and no praise on effort, but just on performance. Whenever they sign test, the question is, where did those 2 marks go? And I understand, I am a mom, and I understand parents when they do that. We're trying to teach our children, how not to make that mistake. Yes, but acknowledging those other points that the child got is way more important first than acknowledging the ones that you're seeing have been cut. So inability to deal with the big emotions of a child and losing temper. Sometimes some parents, some tutors that are helping students beyond your class could also add to the math anxiety. Teaching methods. There is no or little element of being human in the class. There's no humor. It's very dry. Class is not engaging. And it's very difficult to understand and cope with the class. And that all adds to the child's anxiety. So how do we navigate this? Well, one is to reflect, and I will talk about some questions to ask yourself. And then would be to modify habits, enrich your personality, and simplify your instruction. This will also be something which would be a good exercise to do for teachers, to record yourself from time to time and actually watch yourself. Watch how you communicate something, how you answer questions, how you respond to a student, or how you call on someone. If you record yourself in your own time, sometimes these are things that you can work on your own without any supervision. So teaching strategies, stories, which is something I discussed plenty in my first 2 sessions, your own stories and history and background and relevance. And the other one would be movement, to have groups in the class. And a lot of times, a lot of teachers tell me, these are actually distractions for me. Well, it's actually probably not being done effectively. And I talk about how to do groups very effectively. But small situations such as, let's say you're modeling division, that scenario can be done using movement, getting your students to actually stand up and enact a situation. A human number line to actually show, if you're showing reflection or translation, or even adding, subtracting integers, the human number line is something that is basically the floor being used as the number line, and your students being used as numbers going around to see what's really happening when you're, say, adding 3 and a -5. If you arrange students by height, that's a beautiful way of teaching mean, median, mode, and range. So your median height is right in the middle, and then you can see your range, your lowest value and your highest value. And there's so much maths that's possible with movement. So working on engagement. Another thing that I like to talk about is something that just comes very naturally sometimes to maths teachers, because we are maths teachers. And it's not easy being a math teacher, is sometimes to kind of look at something and say, this is so easy. Easy to us today. Not easy to a child who is just trying to understand a problem or a concept, which would mean to first not use the word it's so easy, but to actually acknowledge this may be hard, this could be hard, but let me make it easier. And how would you make it easier is to break it down into smaller chunks, and also understand as a teacher what is needed, what prerequisite is needed to actually teach what you're trying to teach. I'm going to show this with 2 examples. And I apologize if we have some primary teachers here. I may not be using specific examples from elementary today, but tomorrow and my CPA, I promise I am going to come back to some examples from primary school. But here I have an example. Actually, this one is an example of a primary. So when I'm trying to break it down to smaller chunks, here's a question I found in I think a 3rd or 4th grade book. It was a really good one, and I was trying to explain it to a child. So I'm actually going to read it out to you and show you how I'm breaking it down. After Anwar put 25 red buttons and 14 blue buttons into a bottle, there were 92 buttons in the bottle. 37 of the buttons were red. How many buttons were there? I think the word there is repeated, I'm sorry, in the bottle at first. And how many fewer red buttons than blue buttons were there in the bottle at first? There's so much English. Where's the math? Well, there are some numbers here. So I'm going to start kind of breaking the information down into smaller chunks. And I'm going to show it in a very visual way. I can't possibly draw 25, 14, 92, 37 buttons. I can, but it's going to take some time. So I'm just going to use some prior knowledge here that you're able to do addition and subtraction of these type of double-digit numbers and take it from there. So I have 25 red buttons. Thanks to technology and thanks to color coding, I'm using 25 red. You can use a red marker. 14 blue. And I can see that that means that there were 39 buttons that Anwar put. After Anwar put those 39 buttons, there were 92 buttons. So I work with that information first, that after there were 39, what was the number before, such that now that's 92. And I can use commutative property and write it as blank plus 39 is 92. And then use inverse operations, go backwards and make this a subtraction equation to figure out what this blank is. And that is my 53. So how many buttons were there in the bottle at first? Those were 53 buttons. Now I'm going to make sense of my second sentence, second ask in the question. How many fewer red buttons than blue buttons were there in the bottle at first? Okay, that's too wordy. I have to understand what's going on. Maybe I don't know what's going on, but I do know I have some of these numbers. So I'm going to use some of these numbers to make sense of this information. I'm going to go back to ask myself that, well, there were 53 buttons. And I'm also understanding that I'm being asked something about what happened, how many buttons were there at first. So let me go back to what happened first, because I know that 39 is what happened after. I figured out what happened first. What happened first was that there were 53 buttons. So if 53 buttons were there, then out of those 53 buttons, I have been also given some information. I'm going to look at that 53 a little later. I have been given this information that 37 of the buttons were red. 37 in all are red. That means the 25 that were added after means that before there were 12 red buttons. So if before there were 12 red buttons and before there were 53 buttons in all, then before there were 53 minus 12, 41 blue buttons. Once I'm able to get that, maybe it makes more sense for me to go back and read this and try to answer this. How many fewer red buttons than blue buttons were there in the bottle at first, which would mean that I go back and tell myself that, well, that was 41 at first, that was 12 at first. That means the difference is what I need to find when I'm asking myself how many fewer, how many lesser red buttons are there. And I can see that blue buttons are more. So I have to subtract to find the difference to find out how many fewer red buttons are there. I, of course, still went faster than I would have in a classroom setting, assuming we all have math teachers here. But the point is, I'm trying to show you how we break down a problem. And firstly, it is not easy. So that should not be the immediate response to a child struggling and saying, this is hard, I can't get it. First, acknowledge, yes, it is hard. It's challenging because guess what? You're getting older and you're able to hold more things in your head and you're able to write more. And we're going to write more things to make sense of this information. Everything that was written in English, we're going to try to write it in math and make more sense out of it. Another one that I want to talk about when I spoke about breaking the information down, another example I gave was that we as teachers need to recognize the prerequisites to teaching. For example, this is a 10th grade question. ABCD is a trapezium such that AB is parallel to DC. Find X. This question cannot be solved if we don't understand that there are many prerequisites to this question. For this question to be solved effectively, my students need to have this knowledge, which is a proof in itself that the diagonals of a trapezium divide each other proportionally. They need to be able to set up and solve a proportion, and they need to be able to identify and solve a quadratic equation to actually find that value for X. So again, how does that look like? Diagonals of the trapezium divide each other proportionally, which is me saying basically that AO, the ratio of AO to OC is the same as the ratio of BO to OD. And I'm just using now the values that they have given me. I'm using substitution and writing it down. And then not just jumping and saying, oh, now we cross multiply. A rationale for everything. So what is cross multiplication really, and why do we do it? Well, what I'm trying to really do, I just wrote my equal sign a little spaced out. What I'm really trying to do is to get rid of this x minus 3 in the denominator and this 4 in the denominator. So I'm trying to multiply both sides of the equation by 4, such that this 4 is going to go away, because that's going to be 4 divided by 4, which is a 1. And I'm also going to simultaneously multiply both sides of the equation with x minus 3, which will allow me to cancel this numerator and this denominator. So it's going to look a little clean in my next step. I'm going to be able to do these cancellations, and that's going to leave me with 4 times 3x minus 19 is equal to x minus 4 times x minus 3, which is what we jump to when we say cross multiplication. Sometimes that rationale is very important. Why do we cross multiply? Once we do that, we can do distributive property and multiply the 4 with the 3x as well as the negative 19, and then multiply these two factors. The multiplication of these two factors I'm showing on the side. I am actually using first out in last, or you can doing multiplication of binomials here. So getting the product and writing it right here. And this is the product of the left side. And even that, I will take the liberty to skip some steps, but actually showing that what am I trying to do next? I'm trying to set one of the sides to be equal to 0 so I can solve that equation. So that means I'm going to take my 12x to the other side, not the language I would use. I would say subtract 12x on both sides to get rid of it. Add 76 on both sides to get rid of it. And that's what's going to give me this equation, which is something is it a perfect square trinomial? No, it's not. But I can still factorize it by setting my sum as negative 19 and my product as 88. And then figuring out the factors of 88 such that the sum is negative 19 and the product is positive 88. And when I do that, to actually write my two factors here as x minus 8, x minus 11 is equal to 0, which tells me that x is equal to 8 or 11. So definitely understanding of prerequisite skills is not a given. It is something that we all should strive for when we are doing our lesson planning, which is what brings me to what is going to happen tomorrow. I am going to show you elements of a really good lesson plan. Another why for why math anxiety happens is very personal. Sometimes it is beyond your control. It's to do with the child's retention and memory skills, sometimes lack of focus, some social emotional skills that need working, sensitivity, obsession with performance, fishing for points. It happens. I've never had a test and then a student come up to me and tell me, well, I think I got less points. I should have gotten more. And lack of confidence and negative self-talk. And even these are things that, even though they're beyond our control, these are some things that we can work on with our children in a very sensitive manner. So personal and how to navigate would be, of course, to be kind and to work on social emotional skills, which would look something along these lines. First is a caution that please don't use a student's situation and don't fix your gaze at a student while sharing these that I'm going to share next. This is ideally a beginning of the year activity when you're still learning about your students and building relationships. And if you tend to do it at the middle of the year, after my workshop, then please do so discreetly. These will be what will you do when scenarios. For example, you will give a situation to your students and you will get them to reflect on the following. You are struggling to understand a new math concept and you feel like you're falling behind in class. What will you do to improve your conceptual understanding? You will see your students themselves problem solving and giving you solutions for problems that you may face in your classroom with your students. Possible solutions then these are things that you can give to them, which is to talk to the teacher after class or during designated time to get extra help and clarification. Form a study group with classmates who also need help to work on the concept together. Look for resources or videos that explain the concept in a relatable way. What will you do? Another situation. You have a math test approaching and you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed. What can you do to manage stress and perform your best on the test? Some possible solutions: break the syllabus into smaller, manageable chunks, tasks, and create a plan to work backwards and tackle each topic. Sometimes a really good suggestion I've gotten from my own students is they make their own tests. Get them to design their own tests and see what are the topics that actually they think they should be studying for. Sometimes I actually collected and put those questions on the test. Ideas. Practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing or visualization to calm yourself before the test. During the test, prioritize the questions you feel most confident about and tackle those first to build confidence. Here is an activity that I would love everybody to participate with me on. If we can have videos, if it's possible, if you can open your video, I would love to be able to see this. This is a moment to capture for Saryu. I would love for our teachers to practice a little bit of calmness ourselves. And that is a very small activity I like to do, which is known as the candle breath, which comes from this beautiful book called Breathe Like a Bear by Akira Wiley. So it starts like this, and it may be silly wherever you are, maybe on the terrace, but if you can, I would encourage you to please try it out. Imagine you're holding a candle. Thank you for your videos. Take a long breath in and slowly blow air out towards the candle. You're only making the candle flame wiggle. You're not blowing it out. So that would look like this. Long breath in, slow breath out, long breath in, slow breath out, long breath in, and now blow your candle out. Usually, this is something that I do before a test, or sometimes get my students to close their eyes, because they've been talking so much about math and so much about, that last minute revision, that I'm not sure it really helps anyone unless they're trying to memorize a formula. There is no reason why last minute study is required, but it still happens. So this is one thing that I love to bring into a classroom. Some more what will you do when scenarios would look like the following. You've been sick or traveling and missed a substantial portion of a class. You're feeling behind and overwhelmed. What will you do? Some possible situations, teacher and parent support, of course. I do this at the beginning of the year called class buddies. I get my students to exchange their phone numbers, their parents' phone numbers, of course, if they are not that age, email addresses, so that they can contact each other. They know how to contact each other if they miss class, how to follow up, and how everybody is responsible for good note taking, because anybody could be taking anybody's notes. So set realistic expectations, give your best. This is pep talk to the student. Give your best, knowing that there is something better than this best, and that's what is coming next. This may not be your best attempt. I know that. I know you can do better, but let's try. So reflective practices, and this is around the time that I will, after I finish this, kind of take you into Q&A and address your queries. So reflect on practices would look like the following. I love to do a teacher survey, which is anonymous. And there's nothing personal here, but the criticism needs to be taken constructively. If we are trying to give our children constructive criticism and say, take it constructively, we need to be as attuned to taking constructive criticism ourselves. So a teacher survey, and I'll walk you through that. And keep working on self, this is pep talk to you as teachers, and improve your content delivery, your lesson plan, your professional development, what you're doing today, and build on your own emotional skills and how you react to a situation, sometimes with lesser pause time or lesser thinking time than you should. Maths teacher feedback survey, I warn teachers, please take these, but don't do any ratings. Nobody can rate you as a teacher, and nobody can rate you as a parent, as a person. These are ridiculous to have when you will ask someone to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 on something. It's demotivating. Sometimes just to be nice, students can give you all tens, and sometimes just to be nasty, a student can give you all zeros. So it's very demotivating to do a rating, but a questionnaire such as this may help. And these are the questions that will go on a math teacher feedback survey. How effective is the teacher in explaining math concepts and answering your questions? Very, somewhat, not at all. Tell at least one topic that was explained really well in this math class. How helpful are the teacher's feedback and suggestions in improving your math skills and concepts? This happens very often on a test or something. Sometimes teachers are inclined to write, good job, you can do better. Sometimes comments such as these are not really telling the child what is good about that job and what do they need to work on to do better. So some more thought on how we're giving them feedback is very important. Has the teacher created a positive and inclusive learning environment in the classroom? Does the teacher challenge you to think critically and apply math concepts to real-world situations? How well does the teacher communicate expectations and course requirements to you? And of course, if you're getting not good responses, maybe, and if it's not an anomaly, maybe it needs to be worked on. How accessible is the teacher outside of class for extra help or support? Has the teacher been responsive to your individual learning needs? Would you recommend this math teacher to other students? Why or why not? Take it with a pinch of salt. More strategies would be, of course, to have a positive and welcoming classroom and environment. Have parents as partners and think like a student. And all of these are things that I will elaborate on in my session tomorrow. So at this point, Saryo, I would love your help in opening up the chat and leaving us for some Q&A. This is what we are addressing tomorrow: strategies and tools on how to think like a student and alleviate anxiety, and mastery level teaching, which is where I take you through a lesson plan, and how to prevent anxiety and how to create joy in the classroom. So time for a Q&A.
I have opened up the chat.
Any questions, any comment, any feedback, constructive criticism? I'm open to that. I know this is not anonymous. Thank you, Taruna. Thank you for that. Thank you for your kind word. Any questions, anyone? Anything I can address at the moment? How to go with the 3 types of learners? I think Sangvi has asked that question. Ma'am, if it is, one of the things that I had mentioned was, of course, to educate yourself first on more than what I have put out there. There are people who are experts and professionals in the field, and I am just a math educator. And I am myself learning more and more about the children I work with, even if it's been 2 decades of teaching. So there is more to read and study. That's one. But of course, I think a lot of what I will tell, and I have already told, will also take care of giving you tools for the other type of learners, because patience, kindness, talking in a tone that does not make somebody nervous, these are things that all of us can work on, which are kind of like blanket umbrella statements that I would make as a teacher for just good classroom management in any class, even in parenting. So that's one. But I will take on some more strategies tomorrow as well on how to take care of our various kinds of learners and differentiated learning and strategies more in our session tomorrow and our CPA session next week. Any ideas for art integration? I think Harleen is asking me. Sorry, Saryu, I'm already on the chat, so I am looking at some of the questions. Art integration, Harleen, you have to really come for our session next week for concrete pictorial abstract. You will see a lot of ideas, and they will not just be catering to primary. I will be addressing middle as well as high school. So you will see a lot of that. On the top of my head, I can tell you so much with triangles, quadrilaterals, the whole family of geometry. There is so much art in there, and a lot of abstract art. There's, I mean, you know, there are so many examples that I would love to show. In fact, last session, if you were there, I showed tessellation on a floor. I was just walking on a floor and I saw right there a tessellation pattern, which is something that can be explored with angles and different relationships that you're seeing with the sides and the vertices with the higher classes. So I would love to elaborate on that in my upcoming sessions. Any other questions, Saryu?
I guess we do not have any more questions. So everybody's thanking you for this session.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience, everyone.
So Jaspreet ma'am, are you done with the thing?
Yes, I am. From your end, sir, I usually like to, you are my point of feedback at this moment. What is your takeaway?
Definitely. First of all, I would like to thank you, Jaspreet ma'am, for putting light on one issue that most of the maths teachers struggle with. You know, the issue that you have taken up is of maths anxiety. You know what it is. You have defined it so nicely, and we maths teachers, we have seen it and so many times in our classes. There's reasons for it and some methods to reduce it. Also, what I liked was how we as teachers, through our attitude and teaching strategies, can help the child to reduce this maths anxiety. And definitely, like you said, we are going for the CPA session for tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that also. So I'm sure everyone here has a takeaway from this insightful session. There are so many things. We have only connected maths to, chalk and board and formulas, but it is much more than that, I feel, personally.
Thank you, Saryu. There are two things that I am reading in the chat that I would like to address.
Yes.
Sayed asked that in the algebra problem, how would you add color coding to find X? Well, I am using Zoom, so I used my whiteboard. But if you are teaching using a smart board, of course, you can have that. If you're in a classroom with a whiteboard, you can use different colored markers. If you are in a chalk and board classroom, you can use different colored chalk. If you don't have access to any of that, you can draw this on chart paper using crayons, and that would be ways in which you would add color coding given whatever resources you have and what you are teaching with. Another question I looked at, I think it was asked by Deepak, what to do for children who are coping with the number wrong, or I think it was worded little differently before, and I will address that. Children coping with the question wrongly in the exam. Well, the exam anxiety is it's something like what I said at the beginning. It's like if somebody is scared of swimming and scared to get into the pool, it's hard. But at some point, you ease that with your great teaching. One is your great teaching and your mastery level teaching, which is what I address tomorrow as well. but also it comes with a lot of practice. 4 years of Olympic, in 4 years Olympics happens. What are those players doing for 4 years? They are practicing, they're warming up. So it cannot be that we can ever have a situation where somebody just goes and performs. None of us are just performers. If I have been able to deliver what I have been able to deliver to you today, I have rehearsed, I have checked my PPT, I have made sure that as far as possible, I have kind of gone through the flow. So there's so much rehearsal and practice that goes into anything that we do. So there cannot be a student who just takes an exam. We take mini exams on a daily basis. We do homework assignments. We learn how to break down a question into some smaller parts, and we practice so much that when we look at it on a test, it almost seems like, yeah, I know this. I've done something like this, different numbers, but I've done this. I have seen this before. And that's when you get the confidence to really perform. It can never happen in isolation. So I would say the short answer is what I gave right now, but the long answer is all my sessions that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to uncover how to have mastery level teaching, which is all that you can control, and how to teach your children how to be good note takers and eventually, hopefully, good test takers as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jaspreet ma'am, for this insightful session. And I'm sure every one of you here has a takeaway from this talk. And tomorrow we are going to meet at the same time at 4 p.m. and for another beautiful session from Jaspreet ma'am. And on 13th May, the timings are 13th May at 4 p.m. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Thank you, ma'am, once again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.